这都是先是往兵马俑铺头的路的那个资料上布置下的啊，
费了不少功夫吧？
我这36天才把这做起。
嚯，一个多月。
There are no historical records that explain how a Qin crossbow was used, but by conducting experiments we can find out for ourselves. It's now possible to shoot a crossbow just as a Qin archer would have done more than 2,000 years ago.
那咱们试一试。哇，你这动作是绝章啊！
对，你那紧小点拉不动。把这给它哦，这是那个瞄准器，
中间
这个槽子啊，
那中间这个槽。
哎呀，射中了！
我看，
来，
王师傅，这是个几何板？
这是9合板。
哇，射穿了，2层板都射透了，而且透过去1寸多。好家伙，这实际上是18层的胶合板，这个力量绝对是够了。基本上古代的这个铠甲没有这个厚，也没有这个硬度。
A blow like this is equal to a dozen tons of weight concentrated on the sharp arrowhead. At the split second of penetration, there's nothing that can withstand it.
力量很大。
还有3层，
还有3层，我能不能试试，看看这3层我能不能射穿？
Historical records reveal that the reason Qin soldiers were so successful on the battlefield was because of their crossbows. It was always the bowmen and crossbowmen that bore the brunt of fighting in battle. In fact, many soldiers of all 6 states in the Warring States period were killed without even seeing the face of their enemy. They were slaughtered by Qin crossbows.
居然被脱靶！
哎呀，射穿了。
就我这个剑法也射穿了。哇，真是杀伤力很大，但是就是像我这样的人拿起来就能射，所以这就是他的一个很大的长处。他训练起来简单，所以一个农民、一个生手马上可以上手，这太厉害了。
It isn't hard to imagine what happened on the battlefield 2,000 years ago when the Qin unleashed volleys of arrows on the enemy. How deadly were the javelins used by the Roman legion?
在今天的陕西，有人专门复制了罗马的头枪，那么就让我们来看看古罗马头枪的杀伤力。
Although the range is not as good as that of a crossbow, this heavy weapon is just as powerful. When the pitcher exerts all their strength, the javelin can also penetrate 3 layers of thick plywood in one strike.
3层木板实际上它要比古代的盾牌还要厚一些。
The javelin was the standard weapon used by Roman foot soldiers. They would hurl a round of javelins to kill as many enemy soldiers as possible, so there would be fewer of them to deal with in close combat.
如果被它击中，也是可以一击毙命的。
In the era of cold weapons, javelins and crossbows were the deadliest weapons in use. Both were used as efficient, long-range weapons that gave those wielding them the upper hand on the battlefield. But military strategists needed to strike a balance between offensive and defensive tactics. How was this to be achieved? Even in Rome today, ancient Roman armor is not an unfamiliar sight. Awe-inspiring displays of armor can be found throughout the city. What did ancient armor look like? And why did the Roman legion design it the way they did?
进来以后呢，这里边像是一个罗马的兵器库。
The heavier the armor, the greater its defensive capability. This was especially true if you were protected from head to toe.
铁制的，我们来试一试。哦，所以这个铁围脖。
Not in this way, yeah? This is good for baseball, not for fight. You put in this way, you are like a real Romans. So in this way, the enemy don't take off the helmet, because they try to take off in this way, but it's impossible to take off. So the Roman soldier used 2 kinds of armor. This is very heavy, yes, about 10 kilos.
这个
It's good for cut, but it's not protect about the heat. So this is another kind of armor. The name is Lorica segmentata. You can move the armor. Yes, you can move very easy to move, and you can move also in this way.
这样
The body
左右。
is very good for fight.
Your average swords would never pierce a suit of armor like this. 2,000 years ago, this was some of the best armor in the world.
还是蛮上手的这个状态，枪法有分量。这样， 他手里边应该是拿着盾牌，实际上这就可以杀敌了。
At the time, this kind of heavy armor was by far the best in Europe, and with this level of protection, the Roman legion could face any enemy, no matter how strong. It enabled them to win numerous battles without suffering heavy casualties. There were also other underlying reasons for favouring such heavy armour. Although the Roman legion was a very formidable fighting force, they were very often outnumbered, so it was vital to defeat the enemy by drawing out the length of the battle. The main goal was to keep as many soldiers alive as possible for the next battle, and using heavy protective armour was crucial to this. 2,000 years ago, the terracotta warriors also wore armour. It's been proven that each figure in this army was modelled after an actual soldier.
不过呢，它是泥土烧制的。那么真实的秦军的铠甲又是什么样子的呢？
The Qin armour was inspired by a unique idea.
我们看到这个铠甲，它实际上应该是一个陪葬品，是用石头的这个方块连缀而成。实际上呢，真正的铠甲呢，应该是用皮革做成的。
When you try on heavy Roman-style iron armour, it's easy to conclude that the Qin-style leather armour was much lighter. A closer look at it helps you understand why the Qin army chose this type of armour.
用牛皮这一扎一扎这么排列下来，它是一层一层的。所以就像我们生活中有这样的经验，我们切纸的时候，我们要把那个纸摁实了以后，这一刀下去才能切开。但是这个呢，它中间有这个缝隙，有空间，这样的话，它对箭头还是刀剑也好，它有一种瓦解力。
This armour could protect the soldiers just as well as Roman armour. Piercing it would have been very difficult for your everyday arrow or sword. The Qin army could have afforded metal armour, but instead they chose cowhide.
穿那个青铜武士似的，实际上是很笨的。为什么是半身？如果再长，这个士兵他的活动就不方便了。秦国的铠甲就是相对轻便，包括这肩膀，它实际上穿上以后既轻便又活络。说起一个铠甲，它是一个防御武器，但实际上防御武器如果过分了，它会影响进攻。而这个铠甲方便作战，实际上也是有利进攻的。
In warfare, speed is of the essence, so when considering offensive tactics, the Qin army regarded speed as a crucial factor. Their overall strategies were also based on being swift. If they were to crush the much larger forces of the 6 states, speed was essential, and the key to speed was light armour. They were literally racing against time. Victory could only be secured quickly if soldiers went into battle wearing armour that wasn't heavy. The contrast between these two types of armour gives us an understanding of the different strategies used in the East and West. The evolution of heavy and lightweight armour is not only an important part of the history of weaponry, it also highlights the wisdom of adapting to different conditions on the battlefield. Success on the battlefield could be achieved through both heavy and lighter armour, depending on the conditions. How did these two armies mobilise and organise themselves when preparing for battle? The legendary Terracotta Army is famous for its revelation of the mighty power of an ancient fighting force. But this was only one factor in its success.
也就在这儿，隐藏着一个强大军团排兵布阵的奥秘。
So, why have these terracotta warriors been standing in this particular formation for more than 2,000 years?
纵深长是230度，宽是62米，应该有11列、12列，纵横排列。行军作战，从军事角度来讲，这个纵深的阵势，远距离、中距离还是近距离。作为这个阵势作战呢，我们可以看，主要是远射程就是弓弩手扫过去，弓弩、弓箭，然后就是士兵在战车的这种率领下突击，然后其他士兵啊，这就收割手击。
The fact that the speed of attack varied between different armed units tells us that the Qin army must have adopted a particular operational pace. Based on the formation of the Terracotta Army, we can determine exactly how the Qin army mobilized and went into battle. Just as they appeared on the horizon, the first wave of arrows would rain down, catching the enemy off guard. Then, without leaving the enemy time to regroup, the chariot troops would charge into the enemy, breaking their lines. This would be followed by hand-to-hand combat undertaken by the fearless attack squads. Shortly afterwards, the huge infantry formation would push in, surrounding and annihilating the now exhausted enemy soldiers.
我们可以想象，这个气势是很大的，可以说代表了战国以来中国排兵布阵的最高水平。
The formation employed by the Qin Army was based on offensive warfare. They unleashed wave after wave of fierce attacks. But why did they choose this kind of formation? History tells us the answer. The Qin state pursued a clever strategy. The principle was befriending the distant states while attacking the nearer ones. If the 6 states had joined forces, the Qin would not have stood a chance. It was clear they had to defeat the enemy one by one and do so as quickly as possible. A drawn-out battle was the last thing the Qin army wanted. Giving the enemy a chance to join together for a counterattack had to be prevented. What kind of formation did the Roman legion use during the same period? To find out, we first need to take a look at their protective gear.
那么首先我们看到的，这就是罗马人使用的盾牌，方形盾牌。他们当年就是拿着这个去战斗。
Shields were used for self-defense, but shields this big were uncommon. So, how were they used?
那么下面就请这几位朋友给大家演示一下。
The soldiers stood shoulder to shoulder to support each other and used these giant shields to form a moving fortress. This was called the testudo formation, as the soldiers were protected rather like the shell of a turtle. Legend has it that this formation presented the enemy with an insurmountable problem. The testudo offered 360-degree protection. It had no Achilles heel. When implemented correctly, those within the testudo had no fear of arrows or swords. It was even said at the time that a horse could trot on top of the testudo. The Roman legion was composed of many units, but the backbone of the army was, without doubt, the infantry formation, and the number of soldiers in the infantry could account for more than 90% of the entire legion. At the onset of an attack, hundreds of testudos could form various formations depending on the specific battlefield conditions. Slowly but surely, they would advance towards the enemy.
Oh,
Like this.
this is house.
This formation was designed to use maximum defense to weaken the enemy's attack.
这就是龟甲阵。
But how did they come up with the idea? To find out the answer, we need to take a look at an ancient Roman military encyclopedia. In this ancient book, we're told in order to protect themselves, the soldiers gathered their shields around themselves. The testudo was born out of desperation on the battlefield. Historical records reveal that at the beginning of Rome's ascent, the Romans were far too weak to confront their enemies. They could only take a defensive stance and wait for the opportunity to counterattack. As it turned out, however, this was a tactic that worked very well, as they ended up winning victory after victory. After countless enemy attacks, Rome was the last power standing. And the reason the Romans were able to conquer the West was because they attached so much importance to defense. The roles of attack and defense were, of course, unpredictable as they constantly changed. They gave birth to 2 different military practices, one in the East, the other in the West. They were 2 extreme expressions of the art of war.